Natalija Nogulich started her theatrical career in Chicago, where she worked in a theater company with W.H. Macy and John Malkovich. She graduated from Lake Forest College in Illinois before studying overseas in Spain and Italy. She attended the Stella Adler Conservatory in New York City, which gave her several starring roles. Later, she did innumerable Los Angeles productions and also starred in many movies and television shows, including one of my favorite movies of all time, Christmas Vacation, and also appeared on the always wonderful Star Trek: The Next Generation. Natalija Nogulich, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Craig. Delighted to be here.
So speaking of The Next Generation, you played Admiral Nechayev, a strong, focused female character. As a strong woman yourself, and I think that's clear through all you've done in your life, do you think you give strength to these types of roles, or do you think you gain strength from playing these kinds of roles?
You know, that's a really interesting question I've never been asked before. Clearly, I've played a lot of strong roles, so there must be something in me that casting people see that they want to have in that character, have expressed in that character. But the way I work is I feel like I lend myself to the character. So what Nechayev requires, I find inside myself and give that over to Nechayev. I like to, the way I studied with Stella Adler and others, is I lend myself to the character. I honor the character rules, and I clearly I am a little authoritative. You can ask my ex-husband, and I have a lot of her qualities, but I let the character govern and decide which pieces of me the character requires. Have I played, vulnerable characters that are coming apart at the seams? Yes, but and there are parts of me that I can pull up for that, but not as many as the strong character. It's interesting. So I think it's both, but more, that I get strong from Nechayev, but I think mostly I bring my strength to Nechayev, and whatever she requires, I have to pull up. I have to come up with as an actor. And clearly, her being Picard's superior officer and having to do certain things for the Federation, which even she admitted in a couple of episodes she wasn't happy to have to do, like moving the Indians off the land, and it had to have that kind of, well, I'm going to just have to, bite the bullet, as it were, and do what's required. But I must say I love playing those women. So it's a symbiotic relationship, I would say.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. Now, would you think that approach to acting would qualify you as a character actor as opposed to someone who attempts to make the role bend to the person who is actually playing the role?
Yeah, also a great question. These are things I talk about when I'm teaching acting. I'm a character actor. Mm-hmm. I think that it's the story. And we're hired to tell the story in the shoes of a certain character. As I say, my teacher, Stella Adler, who had a big impact on my craft, said, we bring ourselves to the character. We don't drag the character down to our own dreary life.
Right. Yes. What a way of putting it. That's great. Yeah, that's awesome.
That was a little, to the point, but she was very, harsh spoken sometimes. But that made a lot of sense to me because, I have taught, young adults, not really children, but young adults, professionals, seniors, the spectrum. And there can be a tendency to say, well, I feel like I know who this is, so I'm just going to be myself. Mm. Well, plenty of people may have made a career out of that, just being themselves. So I can't condemn it. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
But the kind of acting that I was interested in doing was where you could cover the waterfront in the different roles that you play. And even Marlon Brando, who is so clear, he was a student of Stella Adler too.
Okay.
But he even, could go from being Stanley Kowalski to Julius Caesar, and he still, of course, we recognize him, his voice. Oops. turn that off. But he was willing to go to the character. And that's the kind of acting that interests me. So, yes, I am a character actor. It's kind of a long-winded answer, but it's an interesting question to me. It's one that comes up a lot when I'm teaching,
Yeah, I think it's partly interesting because it touches on the very essence of not acting as a vocation, but acting as an art. To me, and this is not to cast aspersions on anyone who approaches acting differently, but someone who lets the character have the head, have the reins. To me, that is what an artist does. I'm a writer by trade, and that's kind of what I have to do with writing. I have to let characters take the lead and not try to control the flow of what's happening on the page too much, or insert myself as the writer, like playing God, and let them be God. And I find that it works out just a lot better that way. So I totally understand what you're saying.
Well, as a writer, then that what you sounds like what you strive for is for each character to have his or her own voice,
yes,
not just your voice. And I have read plays where I could take the character's name and move it to another character because it's all the same voice. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I could move the dialogue. Jane could be saying what Joe is saying, and Joe could be saying what Louis is saying, and Louis could be, because it's all, one way. And I subscribe to the way you approach writing, and I also like to read the novelists, or I like a lot of historical fiction, interests me a great deal, and the plays where it's individuals colliding in a story. And I think it's just more interesting that way, and good for you. And now I'm going to have to get all your books and read them.
Well, I do have one historical, Night at Key West, Hemingway. So that's something you could look up if you're interested. Yeah, and I was certainly happy to send you a free copy of that if you'd like one.
Well, I would, and we'll exchange.
Absolutely,
novels,
yeah. Sounds good. So going back to your strength as a woman and as an actress, so your father was at Normandy in World War II, and grandfather won the Congressional Medal of Honor in World War I. Do you think that you've inherited some of that fighting spirit?
Yes, I do. And actually, when I always write a backstory on all the characters that I play and create, what I think was their upbringing. And when I worked on Nechayev, I really pulled in the thoughts about my grandfather receiving the Medal of Honor, and he was a corporal. I mean, he was like, they were taking a machine gun nest, and all his superior officers were casualties, not fatalities, but casualties. And he just kept proceeding on his own.
Wow.
And later when my mother asked him, what were you thinking? He said, honey, I was in the middle of the field. I was going to either go back or go forward. So I went forward. Right. And he captured 15 Germans and killed 5 and took the machine gun nest. And his superior officers were watching him saying, I can't believe Jake is doing that. Is he mad? And I think, there's a kind of adrenaline that happens, sure. but also exceedingly patriotic, both both sides of my family. And then for my dad, because I asked him too about that, because my dad, unlike my grandfather, who was a very kind of, tough guy, a little more Nechayev in him, my dad is a real soft-spoken gentleman, and I say, how the heck did you land in Normandy and keep, watching your buddies on both sides falling away? And he said, when I would see that, I would just say to myself, it's not going to happen to me. I'm just going to keep going. It's not going to happen to me. And you realize how much the mental state governs survival.
Yeah.
And I did think about both of them. And my dad's my hero. He's 98. He's one of the last standing Normandy guys. And
so awesome.
Yeah, and he has both my parents have their brain, so I can still pick their brain for stories, about it. But yes, I did draw on that, and I did draw on my respect for the military, overall, and. Because Nechayev was clearly, she was admiral, so, the highest praise I ever got was at a convention where someone who was in the Navy actually was wanting a picture and autograph, and said, I have to tell you, remind me of one of the admirals that I had. But behaved just like you did. And I said, that is all I need to know. In that case, I succeeded at portraying what I wanted, the reality that I was hoping for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we come from a bunch of tough, stubborn Serbians,
Well, speaking of the military now, in the past, you've been an active supporter of various veterans charities like Wounded Warriors or Wounded Warrior Project. Are you still involved with that?
Oh, yes. Currently, now I'm pretty much monetarily involved by donation, but some number of years ago when I still had my theater company in Los Angeles, we did an evening of, it wasn't, and just different scenes from different plays, not necessarily military in nature, but it was to raise money for Wounded Warriors and also the Coalition for Wounded Soldiers, and we made a substantial amount of money in one night and sent that off. And then another opportunity I had through Star Trek, which is really a gift that keeps on giving. I mean, because of the wonderful people I've met through the conventions, lots of military are into Star Trek. I met a young man who wanted to work with me on sending packages to soldiers with CDs, DVDs, autographed pictures from Star Trek, beef jerky, just, a gift package. And he came over to my house and, I guess it was several years ago. And we just put together, I said, you get me the addresses of the, because we wanted to send to specific people, not just the, kind of bulk droppings that they get from a lot of good organizations. So he had specific, so I was able to write to them, and I don't know, we sent off a couple of dozen, and the letters I got, one I'll never forget. This guy wrote to me and he said, it's one thing to get a package from home, but to get a package from someone that doesn't even know me, he said I was moved beyond, and he wrote I have the letter still. And I thought, we just don't realize how alone that way of life can be for them. And so I have to confess, I did it one other time. I haven't done it recently. I've mostly just been doing monetary support. Also, Gary Sinise Foundation, he does a lot for the Warriors. I've given to him. And I don't have my theater company anymore to raise a bunch of money in one night. But I'm a Wounded Warriors and other paralyzed vets, disabled vets. I have several.
Awesome.
That's my main charity is to different military helpers, people that help the military. And the Salvation Army. I like the Salvation Army too.
Right. Well, once the show is over, I want to grab a link from you so I can put that in the description of this video and help raise some awareness for that as well. Okay.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Okay.
My packaging up the things somewhere, but yeah, we'll talk about it after.
Sure. Now you're Serbian American, and I understand during one trip to Kosovo, you found yourself at gunpoint. How did that come about?
And it was my honeymoon, if you can imagine that.
No.
Right? Hey, honey, let's go see my relatives in Serbia. Yeah. Actually, that was just part of my honeymoon. We had a great honeymoon, better than the marriage, but we went from Switzerland to Italy, and then we crossed over into Greece and went up to Thessalonica, and then took a bus into Serbia. And first Macedonia, and Serbia, in my view, Kosovo is Serbia, even though I know they've decided to make an independent, for 600 years it's been Serbia. But anyway, so we're on the bus, and actually my ex really loved this part of the trip because it, is such a different kind of terrain and nothing he had ever seen before. And I had never been to Greece before. So it was all good until we stopped at, it was a bus that stopped at a lot of places. And there was apparently a search for somebody. They got the word, somebody who was carrying drugs across the border from Greece into Macedonia and into Serbia. So, okay. So they come on with their, the soldiers with their rifles, and they're going down the bus and they're asking for passports. So we're the only Americans, and I speak Serbian, and my husband's going, blah, 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 blah. And we give them our passport. I didn't want to give this because I thought, what if they decide to keep them?
Right.
Just didn't know. And it was 1997, so it was between the two wars. There was the 1993, and then in 1999 is when NATO started bombing Kosovo. So everything was brewing then, the tension between the Serbs and the Albanian Muslims, and, it was rough. And this guy thought he would have some fun with me, so because I could speak. So he had his rifle out at me and said, what are you doing here, in Serbian? And I said, well, I'm, I have relatives here. I have my aunts and a lot of cousins, and my mother was born here. And I told him where. And he goes, yeah, how your aunt's doing? I mean, he was really a cocky son of a gun, And I said, well, I'll know more when I see them. And, I haven't seen them in a number of years. I hadn't been there. I'd been there a few times, but I really loved it up in the mountains. And so he kept my passport and continued down the aisle, asking people this and that. And my husband and I were holding on tight to each other because I didn't think he would shoot me. I just thought he could make our lives pretty miserable.
Right.
Because it was a chaotic time. And, I don't know, they throw you in jail and never come out. I don't know. I didn't know. Well, I hung on to the passport. He got off the bus with his buddy, who was also, armed and dangerous. And they opened the suitcase area of the bus, and they took everything out. We were traveling light because we were going through so many countries. We each had one suitcase, one knapsack, really. And they didn't mess with ours, but they did open up one that revealed the drugs they were looking for.
Oh.
And they were able to attach it to actually a young woman. I was really surprised. She looked so like not the person you would, think was carrying anything. And I don't know what the drugs were. I couldn't see, but they came back on. They got her, and they said, "You're who we're looking for. You're carrying, contraband, blah blah blah." They got her off the bus and with this and put everything back on, and finally, at the last moment, gave us our passports back. And then at the next stop, we had to get off and register with somebody who had, again, took our passports for a while, kept us waiting. That's the big fear when you're traveling in a country that's borderline third world. I mean, is that the ticket, and then you're screwed, really.
Right.
Get back to you. So that was frightening. I mean, I have to say,
Yeah.
was in my mouth, and it was after we were safely on our way again, and we landed in Prizren, which is the nearest town to my mother's village, and my cousins met us and picked us up and took us to their home. My husband was like, "What are we doing here? Where have you taken me? Why didn't we just stay in Greece?" He was a history teacher, so he would have been perfectly happy to stay in a museum in Athens for 3 weeks,
Right.
And I said, "Don't worry, it's, things will be okay." And indeed, once we got up to the village where my mother was from, which is, 10,000 feet up and just completely surrounded by beautiful pines and really beautiful area, then he was happy again. And so was I. And my aunt was there, and they spoiled us with their delicious food, and all the young gals in the village had crushes on my husband, and it turned him around. And later he said that was his favorite part of the whole 6. We had like about a month honeymoon, but anyway, yeah, gunpoint and in Kosovo. And I'll tell you, it could have gone either way. I mean, He was definitely toying with me, and I think it would have been really nice for him to be able to snag up a couple of Americans and give them a hard time, because they weren't loving America at that time, because America was more sympathetic to the Albanian Muslims, and there are two sides to every story. But
Sure.
The American press made it sound like the Serbs were killing people and the Albanians were planting flowers. I mean, that wasn't what was happening, although there were some unconscionable things that were done, I'm sorry to say, by the Serbs and the other side too. But so that's my story. I hope I didn't go on too long about that. But
no, that was really amazing.
The only time I've ever been at gunpoint.
Well, let's hope it never happens again.
Yeah, I know. Because I'm about ready to conceal carry if this,
yes, there you go.
Environment goes on in this world. But
it is definitely getting nuts. Yes, but you have written a book set in Serbia called One Woman's War. Could you maybe tell us what the book is about?
I will. I'd be delighted to, and I'm going to send you one. It's historical fiction. It's about a woman who comes from that village. It's based on some events that happened, but not a true story by any stretch. The theme of it is basically revenge versus forgiveness. This woman in this village suffers a loss. I won't say what it is because I don't want to do spoiler alert, and goes to stay with her sister who had emigrated to New York with an American husband some time ago. And she is encouraged by the people in the village to go there, stay with her sister to heal and to just try to recover herself. She's a young widow. And while she's there, she gets a job as a cleaning lady and at a news office. And through a series of not so strange but somewhat unexpected circumstance, she finds out who was responsible for the loss that she experienced. And she goes back for revenge. And something unpredictable happens. I can't tell you anymore.
No, that's fine.
But it, again, you and I were talking as writers now about creating characters.
I did what I do when I'm acting, which is I wrote a full backstory for each character. And I found that each main character, even some of the minor ones, and I found that that's what helped me have each one have their own voice. And not all sound the same, and I also found that when having done that, I did all of that first, and I knew where I wanted the story to go, except I hadn't figured out the ending, but I laid out the index cards and all of that, and I did a ton of research on that period of time in Serbia and in New York, because it takes place also in New York. And I enjoy the research part. And before I even started writing, and by the time I started writing, it really kind of fell together easily, especially the dialogue parts, because the characters were already alive. The descriptions and things I had to, write and rewrite. This Skype thing just keeps going round and round. I'm going to quit it and try it again. So it was, as you know, laborious. Who was it that said writing is easy? Just sit down and open a vein. Right. I forget who said that. But
it's attributed to Hemingway.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that sounds good to me. And I'm still trying while we're talking. The application has been downloaded. Anyway, I don't want to waste our time trying to figure out why my computer has given up on Skype. But in any case, it's interesting because it's such a solitary art, writing and acting is so engaging with others that I realized I've got, these two extreme sides to my person
right.
that likes both. And yes, it is a trilogy. And the second one is One Child's Choice, which I'm working on now. I actually came to Chicago back in May for I took time off. I teach at a college in LA and part-time, and to be with my family and also to spend some time away from LA so I could huddle in my little sanctuary room here and write. And then I got the first chapter done, and my mom had a stroke, and everything kind of flipped. And my job changed.
Sure.
So things have progressed. She's getting better. There's rehabilitation going on, and so now I'm going to get back to it. And then the third one, I haven't settled on a title yet, but it might be called One Man's Man. I'm not sure, but it's going to have the characters that are in the original in them. It's going to be a continuation of the characters, even though it's going to jump around in time. And beyond that, I'm auditioning for things, theater. I'd love to do some theater while I'm out here, just to get back on stage again. Mm-hmm. I've done a couple of TV shows here in Chicago. They were shooting Shameless during the summer. I did an episode of that. There's a new show called Proven Innocent, starring Kelsey Grammer, whom I've known for 35 years. We did theater together in New York, and I did a couple episodes of that. And, so there's work here, but, to be honest, I've been really a caregiver for the last number of months.
Sure.
And that's starting to kind of, but I'm getting a lot of stories from them. And I think there's a screenplay that's going to come about these two oldsters, and I think I'll call it youngsters. And they both have their brains. There's a lot of material there. Yeah. There's more ideas in my head than there is time to execute, as I'm sure you
right.
probably feel.
Well,
I also want to do a one-woman show, and there's just so much. I hope I live to be as old as my parents, because that's going to take that long to get my bucket list checked off. my work bucket list.
Right.
Forget about my traveling bucket list. That's even longer. Taj Mahal, of course, pyramids, of course.
It's just so funny. I mean, most people do know you from your acting career, but you're such an accomplished woman beyond that. Like, you have command of several languages, you write, you teach film, acting. I was just doing some research for this interview. Your resume, beyond what people just know, just blew me away. So much talent, intelligence, beautiful as always, and still working.
Yeah. Still working.
Yes.
Not going to retire. I don't think that will ever happen. There are periods of time where you're working alone in your room, and then there are other times where you're on a stage, and they're both very desirable. So yeah, I just I got a lot of things I would like to accomplish and leave to my niece and nephew. Since I have no children, I want to leave a bookshelf of my books.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll get that far, but that and I love it. I mean, the truth is, I feel so blessed that I found what I wanted to do. I did start college thinking I was going to be a Russian major, and then study Chinese, and then work for the UN. I started college at 16 because I guess I was a smart aleck in school, and they kept pushing me ahead. And they don't do that anymore because they realize they're malfunctioning socially when you push kids, like I was so young when I started high school at 12. I mean, what the heck I know? But at that point, at 16, when I started college, Lake Forest had a very good Russian program, and I was very interested in Russian literature. So I was I was kind of a nerd, and I read a lot of Russian novels on Saturday nights. And so that got my interest in language going. But, it changed as it does. I don't expect anybody to know what they want their first year of college, but I did study. And I got to go to Moscow a couple of years ago for a summer to work as an acting coach on an American-speaking, Russian-produced movie. That was a trip. I had to use my Russian as best I could, and it got better after a few weeks because, I hadn't used it much. Serbian I used, a lot, and they're close. And then I became interested in the arts and studied Renaissance painting, and that's when I took on Italian. I think that when you hello.
Yes, I'm still here. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Somebody's trying to reach me, but they'll just leave a message. I believe that when you grow up bilingual, like we did, my brother and sister and I, that accessing a second and third language after that is easier because you start to think in terms of words having more forms and more sounds are accessible to you, and they don't feel foreign. They just feel like, oh, it's another way of saying I want some water. And
right.
So I attribute it to my parents being clever enough to make sure we spoke Serbian at home and onward. Yeah, I love. I'm very grateful. My life is something. It's not without struggle. It's not without challenge, but
Sure.
it is definitely doing something that I love, and I still have the fire in my belly, both for acting and writing,
Sure.
and teaching. I enjoy teaching too, although I'm on a leave of absence from that for the time being.
Well, you could certainly
I take care of my children,
yeah.
98, 96-year-old babies.
Well, I know that we'll see a lot more from you, but even if we didn't, you've already left a legacy of which to be proud. So I thank you so much for just giving what you've given to the public and just, again, coming on this show. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, Craig, it was a pleasure. I enjoyed talking to you, especially on Skype, because it's nice to look at the person's face.
Right.
And but we'll be in touch through mail. I'm going to definitely send you a couple of things. And what were we going to exchange? Something else?
Books, I think.
Do you want my mailing address?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, at the end of the show, I'll give you we'll exchange some books.
Okay.
All right.
Great. All right.
Thank you so much.
Let me know when we're done.
All right.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.